Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name's Paige, and today I was thinking I'd give you some non-fiction recommendations, if that's okay. So I haven't done a recommendations video in quite a while, and I was originally gonna do archaeology and anthropology non-fiction recommendations because when I told you guys that I was an archaeology student, a lot of you thought that was really interesting, so I thought maybe I could give you some books. So there are definitely some archaeology and anthropology reads in here, but I decided to extend it just to my favourite non-fiction and like my 5-star non-fiction reads, just because I want to give you guys a bit more variety, and anthropology is such a wide area that a lot of these books fall into it anyway. Hopefully you guys enjoy this. I'm always a bit nervous to do non-fiction videos because obviously most people on BookTube are about fantasy and romance and stuff like that, so I never know if people actually like hearing about non-fiction, so I hope this is okay. Just the first book I want to talk about, and I have spoken about this before on this channel, I think it was in my mid-year book freakout tag, but I'm not sure, and that is Unnatural Causes by Dr. Shepherd. This is basically an autobiography, I guess, or like a memoir about Dr. Shepherd, who is a really high-ranking forensic pathologist. And a forensic pathologist is basically someone who does autopsies and stuff like that, and he's covered a lot of high-profile cases, and he provides his thoughts on like the Princess Diana conspiracy from a pathologist's point of view, and it's just him working through cases and also explaining how working with death affected his life, you know, how he dealt with that. This book is what genuinely made me consider doing forensics. So yeah, I really recommend this one. I think it's a fun read. When I say it's about death and like high profile like murder / forensic cases, it sounds like it's really dark, but he has a knack for talking about it in a way that doesn't feel very dark. I guess maybe it's because he's a pathologist and he's used to looking at things objectively and explaining things to a jury in court and stuff, but he's very much able to take the horror out of it and just make it interesting. The next book I want to talk about needs to be in this video because everyone needs to know about this book and needs to read this book, and that is The Great Leveler by Walter Schneidel. I don't know. This is basically a non-fiction book that traces the history of inequality throughout time, and that's racial inequality, gender inequality. It just traces it throughout history, from like farming and hunting and gathering through to industrialization in the Victorian period. It talks about state collapse, revolution, plague, violence, collapse. It really covers a lot of topics, and I think especially with the amount of inequality that is still happening, this needs to be read. I think this should be on everyone's like bucket list of books to read. Definitely try and make an effort to read more specialized books on inequality, so like go and find books on racial inequality and gender inequality and stuff, but I think for an overall picture, especially throughout history and to understand how we got here, this is the book for that. Now the next book I want to recommend is one you've probably heard of, and that is Homo by Yuval Noah Harari. Most people know his book Sapiens, but this is basically the follow-up to Sapiens. So in Sapiens, he tracks humanity throughout evolution and our entire history, and he does it in a very comedic way. In Homo he's looking at our future and where humans are going. So just to read you the back of this book: war is obsolete. You are more likely to commit suicide than be killed in conflict. Famine is disappearing. You are more at risk of obesity than starvation. Death is just a technical problem. Equality is out, but immortality is in. What does our future hold? Basically just tracks where we're headed from a scientific perspective, and also quite a bit from an anthropological perspective. I was first brought to his books when I was looking at doing some research to write my personal statement to apply for university, because obviously archaeology and anthropology not a subject that's taught at school, so you kind of have to do your own research to impress universities as to why you'd be good for it. And that's how I came across his books. It's really interesting to see this cross-section between biology and anthropology. So yeah, I would definitely check this out because everyone talks about Sapiens, but I've never seen anyone mention this book, and I think this one might be more important to read than Sapiens. Now we're going to move on to the specifically archaeological and anthropological books. The first one is again a bit morbid, and this is Bog Bodies Uncovered by Miranda Aldhouse Green. This is a bit morbid and it has pictures in it, so maybe this one isn't for you, but I think as we can tell I have an interest in the forensic and the osteoarchaeological stuff. So this is just basically a book about a case where they found a bog that had a load of bodies in it. The bodies were like perfectly preserved, they still had their skin, and this typically only really happens if someone is preserved in permafrost or in an arid condition such as like the pyramids in Egypt. And now we have this third example of a bog, and something happens with the gases at the top of a bog and the leaves on top of the water that perfectly preserves the bodies. And yeah, this is about that, and it's essentially just a case study of how they found these bodies, how they work through it, their archaeological process. This is definitely a more specific one. It's not really an introduction to archaeology, but I think if you're interested in forensic and bodies aspect to archaeology, or just general archaeological method, this could be really interesting. I know a lot of people who find this kind of stuff interesting without being interested in archaeology. I thought I'd recommend it to you. It's definitely not going to be everyone's cup of tea, but I really enjoyed it, and this is my favourite non-fiction book. So this next book is another one that I think is really important to read in its own way, and this is Affluence Without Abundance by James Suzman. This basically looks at the Bushmen in Southern Africa, and this is very much anthropological. This may as well be an ethnography. I thought this was really interesting to read in terms of ethnocentricity and the fact that we often think that the way we live is the best way to live. As a civilized society, we just always look down on more primitive societies. If any of my lecturers heard me using that word, I'd be shot. Everyone kind of believes that civilization follows a pattern. You know, you hunt and gather, then you farm, and then you turn into a big civilization. There's a lot more steps to it than that, but that's basically the overall like steps to civilization. And there are still these bushmen and hunting and gathering societies that exist around the world, and trust me, in a lot of ways they're doing so much better than we are. And I think we need to be more open to studies such as this, and we need to be more open-minded when looking at other cultures and other ways of life, and we can learn a lot. It's also important to see the collision between a global economy and this hunting and gathering lifestyle, and the effects that our decisions can have on people who want nothing to do with our decisions. Especially in a lot of ways, our eco movements, which trust me, I stand behind. I want everyone to live a more eco life and a sustainable life. However, a lot of our policies will infringe on very deep-seated cultures of these people. So like in terms of hunting and poaching and stuff like that. And I'm completely against poaching for sport, but in a lot of senses these cultures who grew up, who exist within the natural environment, know what they're doing and are not poaching or hunting for sport. So it's just a different way of looking at things, and this is an issue that really confuses my brain because I want to be, no, don't kill animals. However, when you read about something like this, it really just muddles with your point of view. So I really recommend this. I just think it's an important one again. This next book I think you'll like if you just want to look at the world around you in a more analytical light, and that is Think Like an Anthropologist by Mathew Engelke. Now, I read this again when I was looking to apply to university, but this actually ended up being one of my core texts in one of my first year modules. So, you know, it's approved of by anthropologists, and it basically just walks you through how anthropologists think critically and engage with the material around them, because if you try to explain to someone what culture is, it's very difficult to. Culture is a lot of ingrained behaviours within society that you wouldn't be able to pick up on unless you were thinking really, really critically. And it just walks through that method. I think it's a very interesting way to learn how to think about the world we live in, and I, in a lot of ways, think anthropology, and if everyone understood a little bit of anthropology, a lot of things in the world would change for the better. So this is just a really nice summary of what anthropologists do, how they do them, and how you can use these methods in your everyday life. And this last book I'm going to show you is quite possibly my all-time favourite non-fiction book. I can't really express how much this book has stayed with me, and that is Crazy Like Us by Ethan Watters. This is about the globalization of mental health and how mental health and different mental health diagnoses present themselves differently across cultures, and how our Western way of handling mental health and diagnosing things is encroaching on these other cultures and changing how mental health is perceived and how it expresses itself. It's really, really interesting. I believe it uses the case study of anorexia, depression, PTSD, and schizophrenia, and it looks at these case studies in different parts of the world and how the West is changing. And essentially, with the amount of study and publication coming out of the West on mental health, we're causing a globalization of mental health. It just really opened my mind. I felt mind blown after I finished this book, so I couldn't not recommend it to you. This one has really stayed with me. I could still tell you absolutely everything that is talked about within this book, because even though I read it like 4 years ago now, every single sentence is still ingrained in my mind. It really stayed with me, and I really, like, I can't recommend it enough. Those are my favourite / 5-star non-fiction reader recommendations, also kind of / archaeology and anthropology recommendations. Lord knows what I'm going to title this video. But yeah, I really hope you enjoyed that. I know non-fiction is not something that a lot of people are really interested in watching, but I hope that there was something in this video that you're interested in reading. As I said, I think a lot of these books are really important, and I think non-fiction is one of the best ways to open your mind without spending thousands of pounds on studying. So I wish more people read it. I want more people to get into non-fiction, and I want more people to be talking about these books, even if you're not reading them, be talking about them. Yeah, I really hope you enjoyed this and something here tempted you and you really want to read it and you're going to add it to your TBR even if you never get to it. Thank you very much for watching. Do like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more, and let me know if you want more non-fiction videos, because I never know if I can make them, because I don't think people want to see them very often. So yeah, let me know down below. Please subscribe, and I will see you next week for my next video. Bye!